I can see that more people are joining now. So good morning, everyone. Let me share my book with you all, and we will start. I hope you all can see the book by now. And here we are. We are continuing with chapter 4, explanation of the physical manifestations, question 77. Therefore, when an object is moved, lifted, or thrown through the air, the spirit does not take hold of it, lift, or throw it as we do with our hands. He saturates it, so to speak, with his fluid combined with the medium's fluid. We already saw that before, but in case any of you have any question, please do not hesitate. Momentarily animated thereby, the object acts like a living being, with the differences that it does not have a will of its own, but instead obey the impulse of the spirit's will. Hi, Ebony. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. From this paragraph, it seems to me that the spirit is moving the object with its will, which is its thought. And I know you often say that you don't believe that we can do things with our thoughts the way most people think. But I think here is an example. I could be wrong, but that's what I understand. The spirit is actually moving the object with its will, with its thought. And with the object being saturated with the fluid, without the spirit using its will to move it, and the object having some sort of temporary life, it won't be able to move. Am I correct in my understanding?
I don't like to say that someone is correct or wrong. Rather, I like to make people think. Because who is right, who is wrong? What is right today may be wrong tomorrow. And what I can say, before I go on that answer, this very last week, we had information from NASA that the James Webb satellite was able to question through facts everything we believed for quite a long time. Now, the scientists are having a trouble because it seems that the Big Bang never existed. Why I'm saying that? To reinforce what I just said before here today. What is right today may be wrong tomorrow. So as science evolves, we question ourselves in what we thought was right. So now the scientists are having a big trouble because they are having to think, oh my God, there's no Big Bang. So where are we coming from? You know?
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, because if we're talking about fundamental truths don't change. The foundation of something being correct don't change. The Big Bang really and truly, it was not a theory that was true. So eventually science is going to find out that what they believe to be true, which in fact was not true, is going to be proven incorrect. So I don't know if that actually, I understand what you're saying, but my point is we must have fundamental truths to stand on. 1 + 1 is never going to be 6, no matter how much we progress. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about fundamental truths that wouldn't change. It's that we haven't yet discovered to be true. Those truths are not incorrect. We just have not discovered them yet.
Yeah. So how do you propose to prove something from the spiritual world if we cannot do a single math like 2 + 2?
Well, we rely on the foundational information that is given to us. And we do experiments and we make observations.
Mm-hmm. Likewise, in science, it's exactly the same. So I do not see a difference to prove something in science as to prove something from the spiritual science. Everything we read is a point of view of the interpreter. Everything we read is a point of view of the interpreter with what he knows at this particular moment in time. And this particular moment in time, in this book, for instance, was in 1800. If you go to Andrea Luiz, we're talking about 70 years ago. So everything is very relative and nothing is cast in stone. But we always see what we want to see. Everyone is like that. We always understand what we want to understand. And when I read that sentence, I don't see the same as you do, for example. But that doesn't mean that I'm right or you are right. That means that we have different pair of eyes observing the same test, or in science, the same examples. Correct. In my understand here, it's not the will of the spirit that's moving anything. His will, his capability to manipulate the fluids are moving the object. It's not just his thought, not just his will. It's his will combined with his knowledge of how to manipulate the fluids. In the Spiritism, we also have examples where the spirits mention to us that they don't know how they do, they simply do. That means they want to do it, somehow they manage to manipulate the fluids, but they cannot even explain how they do. So we have to keep our minds open to everything. Otherwise, Spiritism is a doctrine that will remain cast in stone forever. And Kardec told us that's not the goal of Spiritism. Spiritism will evolve mainly with science. So what is true today may not be true tomorrow. So once again, the way I read that, the spirit thought about doing something, he moved the fluids, he manipulated the fluids to be able to do. But as I said in the beginning, there isn't right or wrong. I don't see like that. I see that our perception is commensurated with what we're being exposed, is commensurated with our environment, and so on. So I think your question is very positive, because I hope other people do questions like that as well, because that's the way we learn, that's the way we evolve, that's the way we study. So thanks a lot for the question. It was very good, very good. Did I answer your question, by the way, because I get lost when I'm start to talk?
I think in the end we agreed. I'm not saying anything different than you are, but maybe it's just the way I expressed myself.
Maybe, who knows? Morning, Charles.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So I think, yes, you agree. It was what Epony is saying is there is in the natural laws a fundamental truth, but it is our perception of this truth which is sometimes only partial or maybe sometimes even wrong. Yeah? So as long as we evolve as spirits in intelligence, in also morality, we will perceive better and better this fundamental truth. But our perception will always be relative because of our imperfections. Only God is perfect, and this is why the fundamental truth is existing, but it's, our perception is not. And here, I mean, it's really, you need several things. The spirit cannot move the object just like this. No? He needs a fluid, his fluid from his perispirit, combine it with a fluid, which we can call ectoplasm, a vital fluid of the medium, which is has abilities for physical effects. And then it's this combination which, and this is the expression that Saint Louis and Kardec is using, animated momentarily the object with some, how to say, life, but it's not really life. But and then enabling the spirit. Okay, he wants to put it up, he puts it up. He wants to make 3 hits on the floor, he makes 3 hits on the floor, and the object is obeying the will of the spirit as long as this combination of fluid is present.
Munir, I saw you flashing your hand. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was going to say more or less what Sean said. And just to, I think it was in this group that you've shown a picture, Guilherme. It was a cylindrical object, and you look at the shadow on different walls. And on one wall, you could see a round object, circular object. On the other wall, you could see a rectangle. And, you know, people looking at one of them and not seeing the other, they would say the object is round, the object is rectangular. But in the end, both were talking about the same thing. And the truth would be the cylinder in the center of the room. And I think it's more or less like that. But what I understand from what Ebony said is that behind everything else, you know, in this process, and I usually look at the physical side as well. If I want to move an object, it's not enough that I want to move the object. I perhaps need a technique to move the object. I need to combine with an instrument, a proper instrument, to move the object. And in my view, this would be the fluids. But if I don't want to do anything, even if I'm a strong guy, you know, full of muscles and so on, I won't move the object. I mean, it's a combination, as Charles said, different things. And perhaps when we say, you know, oh, it's a thought that starts everything, but it's not enough. I mean, first I need to do that. I need to make the effort. I need to try to find a corner on the object where it's easier to lift it up, physically speaking, not talking about, you know, a spiritual process using fluids and so on. So I think it's more or less, you know, the same thing. And you need thought, you need willpower, you need fluids, you need combination of the fluids, you need the medium to provide the right fluids. I mean, it's a combination of things for the process actually to take place, to occur.
There is a book from André Luiz called Evolution in Two Worlds. It's not an easy book, but this book brings to us clearly the materiality of the spiritual world. It has been brought by an spirit, a reliable one, I guess, by a reliable medium as well. And in my particular opinion, it is the evolution, not evolution, the pluses after Kardec, the work brought by Chico Xavier is one of the most reliable and is a continuation of the work that Kardec has done. So I would recommend you guys to try to find it. Even this morning, I was trying to find that in English, and I could only find that in US, not in UK. So it's not easy to find in English. But I was reading another book this morning, and something that I think is spot on in that conversation we are having as well is there's a Buddhist saying that they did an experiment with 3 blind persons. They had an elephant in front of the 3 blind people. The coordinator of the experience got the blind number 1 to the tail of the elephant. And that blind person said, well, the way I see here is something fluffy on the end. I think that's to clean my house. Very good. He went to the second blind. The second blind person was guided through the legs of the elephant. He touched. Oh, it seems like we have 4 pillars here. I bet it's a support to something that will come above. Could be something big because the pillar is quite big. So he resumed like, yeah, we have 4 pillars in front of me. Fair enough. And the third blind person was to the belly of the elephant. He was touching like, oh, it's something rugged. The texture is a bit not so soft, but it's something that I can see is very big. Could be a barrel of some sort. Could be a barrel that we have to store wine, for example. Here we go. He was not happy with only 3 perceptions of the 3 blind men. He went over there, he got a 4th one, blind as well. He went to the front of the elephant. And the elephant saw those 2 big fences in front of it. And he said, well, there's a massive cow here because those fences are massive. But he never thought it was an elephant. On the end, they all were right to their perception, but they could not have the bigger picture because of their own limitations, because they only could see by touching. But if they were if they had the opportunity to work together, collecting the 4 different perceptions, perhaps they could elaborate a theory that would allow them to come to something more like an elephant. So that's what we should do in a study. That's what I see. Go for it. But keep your mind open to other interpretations, because other interpretations may be part of the bigger picture. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Gil. Hi, everybody. I was just listening to what's just been said, and I've come in part way, but I looked down at the next paragraph and it says, thus the vital fluid impelled by the spirit. And as you were saying, Gil, it's about the fluidity of the spirit making things move. As I've mentioned before, my experiences, and when my mum passed, I saw her spirit, and she wasn't lifting anything except herself, her spirit. So that's lifting. So I agree with what you said in the beginning when I came into the conversation, that the fluidity, that's what I got out of that conversation. The fluidity of the spirit is important. And what we know today might be different tomorrow. And today I know what I know, that you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow it might be slightly changed.
Mm-hmm. What I see, what I believe, what I'm convinced is that the spiritual world is exactly the same as our world, in a different vibration, in a different dimension. There are enough books from reliable sources that mention to us the materiality of the spiritual world, how they do everything. And once again, I'm talking about the world nearby. I'm not talking the world, evolved world. Evolved world, we have not a clue. That's the best I can say. We have a very little information, and everything we say is just what we want, because we have very little information, very, very little information, and not concise information. Sometimes they come with so many different words that does not allow us to make a conclusion of it. But the spiritual world nearby is exactly the same as here on Earth, in a different vibration, in a different status of matter. And that is supported by, not by me, by other spirits and reliable sources. And here on Earth, everything is start with our will. Our will produce our thought. But our thought is not enough to move a car from place A to place B. But I can say that through my will, through my thinking, I realized that my car had no fuel. And then I filled up the tank, and that was it. Now I have everything I need to move the car from A to B. But over the years, I decided not to battle about this point. Why not? Because something I always say, people believe in what they want to believe. If I get someone arriving on the Spiritism today from, let's say, from a Catholic church, he's happy to call himself or herself a Spiritist. But deep inside, still a lot of what he or she has been taught in a Catholic church. Even that principles of hell and heaven, those principles of punishment, is still there. Takes a lot of time to get rid of it. Sometimes never will. That's why we're saying people trying to change the Spiritism as they like, because that makes them more comfortable with themselves. So there's no point to argue. There's no point to have a quarrel about it. And I can give even another example. Things I see today was way different than I saw when I was young. Let's say on 18 years old. I've started on the Spiritism before that, but let's say that when I was 18 years old, I could not see things I see today. So that's very normal. That's very normal. And that is part of what a study is for. And a study is not to bring answers. That's one of the main mistakes people do. A group study like we do here is to bring questions. And then we go away from the study without questions, our unsatisfied questions. Because some of the questions we will do will be satisfied. Hopefully some of them will not. And then those questions that we are not happy will propel us to do a research, to do our own study. So a common mistake is people coming to a study. First of all, they don't read anything. They don't study anything. They come to study to someone to give what they know to them. But knowledge is not acquired like that. Knowledge is acquired through a thorough study about the subject. And then when we come into a study, then we have so many questions. That's why I'm always happy when anyone has questions. Because when we start to have questions is when we start to profit from the study we are in. And I'm also very happy when those answers given are not sufficient, because that's the only way people will be propelled to study, to really study. Because otherwise we stay where we are forever. We need to have a motivation to push us to, I don't agree with this guy, so let me prove he's wrong. And that's very good. That's very good. That's very good for two reasons. One, the guy can be really wrong, and he will learn with the consequence of your study. Or the other one, you come to the same conclusion after a period of time. So I have no words to say to you guys. Make questions. I'm pretty sure a lot of people leave the room with doubts. I'm pretty sure. But he's afraid to ask. What do you gain with that? Nothing. You came to a place, you gave 1 hour of your Saturday, and you're leaving with a doubt. So it's anyone's choice, so be it, but I would. So carry on. Thus, the vital fluid impelled by the spirit endows inert objects with artificial and momentary life. Since the perispirit is nothing other than this vital fluid itself, it follows that the incarnate spirit, by means of its perispirit, is what gives life to its own body. Do you follow that? I can see some faces. No. Good. So the perispirit is the vital fluid. Open the mic, Jack, otherwise I won't hear.
I'm waiting for you to finish your thought.
Okay. So the author is saying the perispirit is made of fluid. Is he right? Yes, totally right. Our physical body is made of fluid. Yes. It is right. Yes. Okay. So when we are incarnated, our perispirit is within our physical body, means that the perispirit gives life to our own body. The day our perispirit leaves permanently our body, we're dead. When we sleep, the perispirit goes away, can be close or further from the physical body, but is still attached to the body. So we're still alive. But when the perispirit goes away, there's no life on the physical body anymore. When it goes away permanently, okay? By means of its perispirits is what gives life to our own body. Okay. Our physical body without the perispirits do not have a life. Okay, Jack, go on.
Now the question. I understand a little bit of what you've explained. My question is, when it comes to the fluid and when we're incarnated, the body has a type of fluid and the perispirit has a different one. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And they are, what do you call that in English? Life fluid, vital fluid.
Yeah.
That's a different one, vital fluid. Okay. There are more fluids that are part of our life, right? We need to spend some time trying to dig in here and there, what they are, what they do, how they interact with each other, right? And it stays united to it as long as its organization enables it to. So that means the perispirit is attached to our physical body as long as we have vital fluid. When the vital fluid is gone, the link is broken, right? So that's why we have to be careful with our choices. Sometimes we use our physical body in the wrong way, and then we consume more vital fluid than we should, or we don't take care properly of our physical body, and we may anticipate that departure. When the spirit withdraws, the body dies. So if instead of a table, we took a wooden statue and act upon it like we did upon that table, we would have a statue that could move about and produce raps in response to our questions. In other words, we wouldn't have a statue that was momentarily animated with artificial life, besides talking tables. We would also have talking statues. He's doing like a joke here, right? How much light this explanation casts over an infinite number of phenomena, therefore inexplicable. How many allegories and mysterious effects it's resolved. So when we start to be acquainted with the characteristics of the perispirit and fluids, we start to eliminate a lot of those inexplicable phenomena, right? That's why it's very important to the Spiritists to go deeper and study those subjects. in spite of all the evidence, disbelievers object that the phenomenon. Hi, Charles.
Yes, William, sorry to interrupt. Sorry, I have the cam off. Sorry to interrupt you. You see, in the previous paragraph, Kardec is writing that, sorry, I lost it now. That the perispirit is nothing else than the vital fluid itself. Mm-hmm. So we understand that the medium, which is able for making an enabling physical effect, is external, is how to say, releasing this vital fluid that is then used by the spirit to animate temporarily an object. Okay, but we discussed also the question of ectoplasm. And the ectoplasm, we told, yes, the vital fluid is nothing else than the ectoplasm. So this would mean that the perispirit is nothing else than the ectoplasm. You got my point? Mm-hmm. So I think here the statement of Kardec is, how to say, with what he had as an information at that time, but needs to be investigated more in depth. I give an example. The perispirit, nobody was yet, how to say, there are some attempts done by the Russian or whoever to wait, to determine if the perispirit has a weight or not. Okay. Nevertheless, when there were William Crookes, for instance, he was putting the medium on balance, and he was determining that when the materialization occurs, the weight of the medium was much less, even something like up to half of his normal weight. Mm-hmm. Then they tried, of course, also to weight the materialized entity in order to see if there is a conservation of weight somewhere. But they did not succeed because it's not so easy to measure the weight of a materialization, and there can be also some effects like levitation or whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So you see, there is a kind of a contradiction here. So I think we cannot state that the perispirit is exactly the ectoplasm, or that the ectoplasm is exactly the vital fluid. You know, there is something more which is involved here, and this needs, of course, deeper investigations. Mm-hmm. Well, I just close the parenthesis, but it's just to show that what we talked at the beginning. I mean, Kardec is writing what the knowledge he had at that time. And for such type of explanations, that is exactly where I think the further elements which came after Kardec are bringing even more light than what Kardec had available at his time. Mm-hmm. So confirming somehow this progressive aspect of the Spiritist body of knowledge.
Something you said, Charles, that I need to make clear to everyone. Are you saying that Kardec was wrong? Definitely not. He was not wrong. At that time, that was the information he had. Is the information complete? No, it's not complete. With what we have available today, I can say, yeah, the perispirit is made of fluid. Like I just said a few minutes ago, our physical body is made of fluid. Ectoplasm is the fluid, vital fluid. No, ectoplasm is a derivation of the universal cosmic fluid. Do we have ectoplasm only in our physical body? No. But we don't refer to the fluids from the spiritual body as ectoplasm, just for the sake of not making things more complicated. So when we talk about ectoplasm, we talk about the physical body ectoplasm. Charles said about the experience of weighting the medium when he was donating ectoplasm for physical manifestation. That's well registered. in the Spiritist library, if you like. Back in Brazil, there was a medium called Ph.D. He was from my city, and he traveled around the country. He was not born in my city, but he finished his life in my city, and his daughters are still there until today. And when he was donating ectoplasm, depending on the intensity of the session, his physical body shrinked. And there are reports of the people that participate on that meeting to the level that he became a mass. He shrank to a point that he was just like a goose mass. When the session was over, then he was able to recuperate his physical format as normal. So there's a lot of things we do not know in detail, and there's a lot of things that are not mentioned in Kardec. Oh dear, I have 3 hands now. Who was first?
Jack.
Go, Jack.
This is just to complement what I hope it does, what you've said in regards to Kardec. St. Augustine gives a message in the gospel that says progress is the law of nature. Mm-hmm. And then there's another bit that carries on saying, according to the law, earth has been materially and morally inferior. So we're getting there. We are slowly learning more, seeing more. So what you and Ebony discussed right in the beginning about the truth and about what's the information that's there, I think it ties in with the fact that we're still learning, we're progressing, we're getting to the point where we understand more. Not necessarily that Kardec wasn't presenting the whole truth. Sorry, that was just...
I tell you what, Jack, I really hope that in 10 years' time from now, at least one part of what we believe is right is wrong.
Yeah.
So that means we are progressing, right? Not only in science, but also in Spiritism. So who is the second one, Munir or Charles?
Munir.
Go, Munir.
Thanks, Charles. I had the same doubt as Charles when I first read this part here, but then I went back a couple of paragraphs. And then what I understood is that first, this is the medium's book, and then Kardec and the book Genesis that came after. He explains in more detail the vital fluid. But then what I understood here, because he talked about the perispirit as the fluid. So he referred at some points to the perispirit as fluid. And what he's trying to do, in my view here, is to say that the fluid that gives life to the object, that's why he called the vital fluid, impelled by the spirit, endow the objects with artificial inert life. So what he's saying is that the fluid that gives life to the object is the perispirit. And then later he comes and says that, by means of its perispirit, medium's perispirit and the spirit. So what I understood is not, he's talking about the vital fluid as he's going to call in Genesis, but the fluid that animates, the fluid that gives life, that makes the movement of the objects possible. And I replaced by the perispirit, and it looks okay. But you may be right, Charles. I mean, he's just, giving, the ink at the surface, the paint at the surface, and then there's more to come.
Charles?
Yes, this is, it needs anyhow clarification and further investigation. And with what you told, Guilherme, about Peixotinho, what we have seen with Crook's experiences on Florence Cook with the change of weight, and also there are some other phenomenon by Aksakov showing that the arm of the medium was partly dematerialized during the phenomenon, tends maybe to lead us to understand that what is called ectoplasm is a combination of this vital fluid plus some of part of the material body, and this is why there is this difference of weight. this could explain why there is this difference of weight. So it's just an hypothesis.
In the recent past, there are people, they are advocating that the ectoplasm is generated on the mitochondria of the cells, right? But there's also too many theories of how that is, how it is produced, right? So that's why we are having an effort to make lots of questions to the spirits in the very near future to be able to give us a bit better glance of what would be ectoplasm as we're talking about. And just to give you guys an idea why I'm saying that, because you're not aware of it, is there is a group of people that are getting together to replicate Kardec's method, asking spirits in many countries, in many institutions, different mediums, different beliefs, if you like, to be able to have, through the universal teachings of the spirits, come to a better understanding of few subjects. There are ectoplasm, perispirit, and epigenetics, right? Just for your information. So yeah, so I love this subject because there is a lot of things to research. And as we all see here, we don't know. We know so little. And then we have another thing, right? There is a knowledge brought to us by the spirits, and there is a knowledge brought to us by incarnated spirits. I may come up with a different theory. I may write a book. I may give speech left and right, but I may be totally wrong. So I think it's fair to say that to the people on this side of the life, incarnated beings, they have the duty to study, to create theories, to elaborate whatever they want to do. But we have to always return to the basis and ask the spirits, tell me, is what I'm thinking right? Can you complete what I'm thinking? Am I totally wrong? Because I may be totally wrong. But one thing that happens quite often is that as I am the doctor of that subject, I start to create so many people believing what I believe. And on the end of the day, I'm not even prepared to revisit what I think is right. Because it's human, it's natural. That's why in the scientist environment, they used to say that the scientists never accept another theory. And science only evolves when the owner of that theory dies. Because then someone else with a different theory will come and present a different pair of eyes of the same exercise, for example. What I said here in the beginning, remember that James Webb found that there enough evidence to prove there was no Big Bang, right? And we have thousands of scientists already living on Earth. They advocate the Big Bang for decades. So possibly what this James Webb is bringing to us today will only be studied in depth or convinced more people when the people that advocated the Big Bang is not there anymore. So that is something we'll see for the next couple of decades. So I lost where I was. So I think it was 78, right? Yes, I think so. In spite of all the evidence, disbelievers object that the phenomenon of levitation of tables without means of support is impossible because it is contrary to the law of gravity. First, we will respond that denial in and of itself is not proof. Second, if the phenomenon is real, it is somehow contrary to the all known laws. Funny, because he put here known laws, because the laws we know today compared with the laws we knew at that time of the book evolved, right? But even the laws we know today is not enough to prove everything to us, which would prove one thing. The phenomenon originates from an unknown law, and those who deny the fact cannot claim to know about all the laws of nature. This is one point that we always will have a fight, because there are people that will always defend that we know everything, we know the laws, we know how it works, we know where it's coming from, we know what is going to happen. Likewise, the laws on the spiritual world, they are not all well known by the spirits, by all the spirits. No, they are evolving. André Luiz has in more than one event a description that says, well, based in our studies today, that's what we know. He said that. So they don't know everything either. What we know is that they have a more advanced knowledge than we do because of the access for the information, if you can say like that. But they don't know everything. They are also evolving in knowledge, in science, and everything. We have just explained this unknown law. Nevertheless, disbelievers will not regard our explanation as sufficient, since it was provided by spirits who have shed their earthly garments instead of spirits, who still wear theirs and occupy a seat in the academy. Hence, if the spirit of Arago had revealed this law while he was still alive, they would all have accepted with eyes shut tight. But if given by the exact same spirit after death, it would be poor nonsense. Why so? Because they believe that since Arago is dead, then everything he believes is dead forever. We have no intention of dissuading them. Nevertheless, since this objection might trouble certain persons, we will try to respond to them from their very own point of view. That is, we will momentarily set aside the artificial life explanation. If today, let's do something here now, right? We're gonna do a mediumship meeting just now here. And let's take one serious person here, Munir. Munir will be the medium. And I will ask the spirit, communicating through Munir, a very important question. My friend, is your perispirit made of fluid or air? And the spirit communicating through Munir, you tell me, you're totally wrong. It's not fluid, it's not air. My perispirit is made of atoms. Atoms in a different vibration. Atoms that elaborate organs, fluids, feelings, everything. Period. End of the answer of the spirit. After that communication, the medium himself, he may not agree with the answer. It's possible. We all were in the same room as the medium. None of us could say anything bad about the medium, any bad intention about the medium. Nevertheless, the answer from that A spirit, he never mentioned his name, that we have atoms in our perispirit, oh, that is hurting me too much. I cannot accept my perispirit as atoms. So in the end, we can have many explanations from the spiritual world. And if we, as incarnated, do not evolve our thinking, our exposure to different facts, different arguments, different questions, we can receive any answer. Doesn't mean anything to us, won't help us at all. We had many answers since Kardec elaborated Spiritism, the doctrine, sorry. And a lot of things we don't believe. A lot of things we even try to prove that the medium, he was faking it. The medium have different objectives. Because Munir sell atoms in his shop, he was trying to convince everyone to buy atoms in his shop because he was saying that was atoms. So we believe in what we want to believe. But I think our duty is to prepare ourselves for different kind of information, for different possibilities. I think that's one thing we all have to keep in mind. We need to keep ourselves open for different possibilities. Sorry, Munir, I use you as example.
No problem.
Because I see you on the top, so that was you, the first one.
Okay.
When one creates a vacuum in a bell glass by using a vacuum pump, the bell glass sticks to the base and it is impossible to unstick the glass because of the air pressure holding it down. If air is put back into it, the bell glass is easy to unstick because the air pressure has been restored to equilibrium. And if it is left to itself, it will remain on the plate due to the law of gravity. However, if the air pressure inside the bell glass becomes greater than the air on the outside, the glass will rise in spite of gravity. If a rapid and forceful current of air is employed, the glass will remain suspended in the air without any visible means of support. Like what happened with those dolls that is pinned up on the spray of a water fountain. So why wouldn't the universal fluid, the basic element of all matter, accumulated around the table, not have the ability to increase or decrease the table specific relative weight? Just like the air does with the bell glass, or hydrogen does with balloons, without derogating from any law of gravity. Do you know about all properties and the full power of this fluid? No. Well then, do not deny a fact simply because you cannot explain it. I like very much that item because Kardec was bringing to us science something that we all can replicate here. You just need to buy the right equipment, but we all can do at home. Carefully, of course, talking about glass and pressures. And on the end, do we know all the laws? I don't think so. I don't think so. Even the laws we know today, they are incomplete. They are incomplete. And we have a lot of good people working in science to develop, to elaborate further those theories and laws we know. But the main thing is, do not deny what you do not know. You may not agree, that's a different thing. But do not deny. Do not deny. A person I know many years ago in a lecture, he discarnated now. He mentioned something about a book he bought. He bought a book because everyone was talking about that book. That was a nice book to have, different teachings, blah, blah, blah. And when he was reading the book, he could not agree with what was written, to the point that he discredited even the medium that wrote the book. After 15 years, he never threw the book on the rubbish. After 15 years, he decided to get the book and read again. to his own surprise, he was in accordance with everything that was written in the book. So talk to this person 15 years to start to realize that what was written was not wrong as we thought, and there was something that was coming to help. This person, at the time, he was ahead of a massive group of Spiritists back in Brazil, the person who gave that lecture. And I never forgot. I was listening to that lecture, and I never forgot that. And since that lecture, even when I do not agree with something written in a book, I keep it in the shelf. Eventually, perhaps, I will revisit what is written, and I may not have the same judgment as I had. Of course, it does not apply to everything, right? Many things are outrageous sometimes, and we very unlikely will be able to accept that, but not everything. What time is it? We have 3 minutes. So any final questions, any final comments before we wrap up? Come on, yeah, go for it.
Hi, Guilherme. Sometimes it gives me the impression, going through these items in the medium book, it is like a soap opera when you're about to learn the secrets, and something happens and you don't know it, and then okay, next time, and then I ask myself, so why is the point in never go into real depth and understand everything? But we are in a point where we have no condition to understand things in depth, because what the spirits brought to us is just the initial, the entrance to a world that is still very much unknown to us. What do I do with this? I think it gives us the information, enough information for us to stop believing in certain mystical things and start to understand the general aspects of mediumship. This is the case. Otherwise, people would believe in all sorts of things related to the exchange with the spirit world. And so this gives us a north, it's just the necessary information for us at this point to be able to understand the processes behind mediumship, not in detail, not if it happens this way or that way in exact terms, but to give us a north and analyze things, with this information in mind. That's why I see, well, we may not have all the answers, but what we have is already enough for us to, come from the shadow darkness and the dark ages into, an age with more light. And of course, work for the future when they will bring more information and experience to us.
I totally agree with you. And it brought to my mind a conversation that I have with the Geraldo Lemos about André Luiz's books. A lot of information are there, but we are not capable of perceiving that information. As we progress in study, in time, in exposure, experience, when we read again the same book, we start to find new layers of information on that very same book. And I was making a joke with him. It's like a video game. I need to pass from one phase to another. And he said, yeah, it's pretty much like that, because I'm still doing the same, and I'm still finding a lot of things I could not find before. And it's there. Perhaps you could not find before because we were not ready. Perhaps we did not have enough education at the time, scientific education at the time. Perhaps we did not have a good will to find what was there. And now, because we are a bit more open to different information, we are able to find. And I think that applies to Kardec as well. The information is there. Eventually, I'm still getting surprised. Well, it was there all the time. And I read that Spirit's book for so many times and I could not see that. I think we all evolving, and we have opportunities to find more information and more information and more information, depending on us, how serious we are. Because if we are really serious about a study, we are not alone. There are spirits around us saying, hey, have a look at that word. You don't even hear anything, but look at that word again, you know, it means a different thing. They start to push you to perceive things in a different way.
Yeah. And we are not talking about a third party. We are talking about, you know, my perispirit is here, my spirit is here, vital fluid is here, everything is. So we're not talking about something else. We are the laboratory, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. When we are praying, for example, and we start to see that vibration in our physical, flowing away from our physical body, what is that? We all can make those experiments, but we are afraid to do. Well, that was very, very good. And I'm looking forward to have you all here again in a week time. Let me stop the recording.